Hey, I'm Regina. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm sharing my inspiration with you for several projects. I found this little 99-cent caddy at the Goodwill, and obviously a little girl had a super fun time decorating this to be all her own. It's just a simple little piece that I can rekindle and use for my art supplies that I tend to grab the most in my work area. So the first thing I do is I remove all of those little buttons, and then I go in and give it a light sanding. I just want to make sure there's no residual glue left, and then I take it outside and I spray it with a primer, not a thick coat, just something thin, so that green paint doesn't bleed through. Now I'm going to go in with some chalk paint in the color Adirondack and start getting my first coat on there. I'm always messy with my first coat. It's a lot less forgiving than your second coat. Once I got that first coat on there, I did let this air dry just in case there was some bleed through, but there wasn't, so I went ahead and put my second coat on and got that to dry. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Redesign with Prima Decor transfers and the design Delicate Roses. I've cut a few pieces apart from the main sheet and kind of lined it up just to see what I wanted to use, and I knew that I wanted to use this larger piece on the end. So what I do is I peel back the carrier sheet and place it down on the caddy. I rub over the entire thing, and once it's down, it's down. There's no going back at this point. So I'm just going to take my stick, which is perfect for this project. Sometimes you need something that's a little harder, but because I'm using a really hard surface, this worked fine. As I pulled it back and there were pieces that were still hanging on, you just lay the carrier sheet back down or the transfer sheet back down, continue to rub it with your stick, and then peel it back when it's ready. After I took the sheet and rubbed it over top of the roses just to burnish it down, and by burnishing, what it does is just works kind of all of the bubbles out, and then I moved on to my next piece. Just remember, there are no rules when you're using these transfers. If you want to layer them, layer them. If you want to use just one piece, just use one piece. Whatever makes your eyes happy is what you should definitely go with. Now that I like the way it looks, I want to add something else because the white is a little too stark. So I have this handwriting stamp and some IOD ink, and I got the stamp from Temu, I think. I'll link it below if I find it. And I ink the stamp, and then I go ahead and I dab it off on my piece of paper just so the ink is not going to be so heavy. And I place it on top of there, and when I do that, I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to look so pretty. So you can see that I'm still not re-inking yet. I'm just going for the very faint handwriting look. And this also will keep me from having to go in and sand it. Now, if you did ink it and it was too dark, you can definitely go in with some sandpaper, some fine grit sandpaper, and lightly sand over top, just to kind of dull out that black ink. But I'm liking the way that this looks, and I'm not having to re-ink too much at all. I'm just kind of working my way around the piece, deciding where I want the stamp, trying to get rid of some of that white starkness. And in hindsight, I'm thinking this probably would have been prettier had I painted it like an ivory or in the color plaster, something just a little off-white. I do go ahead and I do just some little details on the side that you're going to be able to see, and then I go in and I want to add more. So I do end up covering the middle section as well. Not a perfect stamp, just something that looks like it's reminiscent. My next project has some serious French Country Rustic flair. At the Goodwill for $1.99, I got this Bromwell's flower sifter. All I'm going to do is I cleaned it up really well, got all the old flour off of it. I'm going to take some greenery. I believe this is called baby's grass. but I really love the way that it looks. I love the color, I love the flow. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sit it in top of the sifter until I like the way it looks. I can't wait to put this in my kitchen. And the reason why I'm not gluing anything in here is because I can't wait to be able to change it out for the seasons. Like, this might be a great look for everyday decor, but how pretty would it be for spring with some lamb's ear in it and some lilac? Or in the fall to have some pumpkins coming out of it and some sunflowers. I think this is such an easy way to dress up your kitchen counter. I'm going to take some muslin next, and I'm going to cut some pieces about 1 inch. And you just want to cut a slit in your muslin and then rip it so that you get that really pretty frayed edge. I cut about 3 pieces, or should I say I rip 3 pieces, and then what I do is I take the first piece and I just start to loop it over on itself. So if you were looping a bow, so I fold one over, fold the other side over, and then I bring the other side back. And then we're just going to take the next piece and go from the other direction and flip that over and then over again to create some loops. With the third piece, I'm just going to tie it around those 2 pieces and tie a tight knot. I love the way that muslin feels and looks. You can tie it into so many different decor styles, whether it's farmhouse or shabby chic or French country farmhouse or French country. It really works for all of them. After I tie the knot, I just kind of fluff up my bows, and then I'm just going to simply tie it onto the handle of my sifter. I don't double knot it because, again, I can always change it out for the seasons, and once I get it on, I fluff the bows back up and then I just cut the tails. And once we cut our tails, that's it. It's perfect and ready to go. You guys are going to think I'm crazy because I'm switching between styles, but you know, when your creative heart gets going, it just goes. So I found this little mirror on Temu and I thought, this is really cute. It's definitely like a shabby chic looking mirror, and I loved everything about it except for the color. I'm not sure that it looked like this when I saw it online. I thought that it was just ivory, but it's definitely speckled. So what I did was I put it together, taped up the mirror so I don't blind you while I'm painting it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our Waverly chalk paint and the color Silver Lining because it's very neutral. It'll, you know, if I want to put it in my bedroom, I can, or in my bathroom. And I start to paint all of the little details. And honestly, when I first put this paint on here, I was thinking, this is going to be amazing. There are just some times when you find something and all that it takes to bring it to life is a little bit of paint. And I think that's what I'm doing here. So I go in and I do paint every little single piece that I can get to. And once it's dry, I do go in. It wasn't peeling or anything because that's what I was worried about. Once it's dry, I go in and give it 2 coats and that's it. It worked out great. So I peeled off all the tape and wiped it down and put it in its new home. Our next project is French country farmhouse inspired. I found this tray at the Goodwill for $2.99. It's solid wood, has great bones, and was just begging to be made over. I'm taking our Waverly chalk paint and plaster, and I'm putting on a nice thick coat. Now, the paint that's currently on here was starting to peel back around all of the edges, so that's where I focused the painting on first. So I'm going around all of the edges and corners with a nice thick coat of paint. And once I get that first coat down, I'm then going to go in with a rolling brush, a rolling foam brush, And I'll link these down below too. They're great for bigger projects. And I'm just rubbing out or rolling out all of the harsh lines. Once I get all of that worked out, I do go to the outside and I do that as well. And then once it's dry, I go in and give it a second coat and I do the process all over again. Now I'm taking my tape measure and I'm just trying to figure out where the center of my tray is. Once I find that, I go ahead and mark it, and then I'm marking on either side of it because what we're going to do is going to make some French country flower sack stripes onto our tray. So I begin with some masking tape or painter's tape, and I'm going to use my marks as a guide, and I've put my first piece down. Once I'm happy with it, I'm eyeballing it. I'm not using a level to make sure it's completely straight. I'm just going to put down the other piece of painter's tape. So I can create about a 2-inch stripe down the middle. As you see me draw my finger across there, I should have put tape there. So if you're going to do a tray, make sure you put tape there because the way that I sponge it on, I end up getting it on the side and have to touch it up. So I'm taking our chalk paint by Waverly and the color Silver Lining, and I start to pounce it on with a little foam pouncer brush. When I realize that I'm not going to be able to get close enough to the edge, I do go in with a smaller brush and paint against the edges where the two sides meet. Then I go back in with my little foam pouncing brush, stencil brush, I'm not sure what you call it, and I am dipping it in the paint, but then I'm also dipping it off on the paper so that the paint is not too thick. Now, because I'm very impatient and this is definitely going to be a several step process, I take my blow dryer and I give that a good drying. Now I'm going to go in for the second time with the smaller brush, and again towards the edges I'm going to thicken that paint up and double the coat. And once we get that down, I go back in again with the foam brush and pounce on this second coat of the paint. Once that dries, we get to go in and do the fun part, the reveal, the pullback. Ta-da! Don't you just love how fresh that is? Every single time I do that, well, I can't say every single time because sometimes you do get a little bleed, but this one turned out really well. It's so pretty, but we definitely have to move on to our next step, and that's more tape, and we're going to do the thinner lines on the other side of the flower sack stripe. So I'm just taking some yellow tape this time that's a little thinner. It's just an arts and crafts tape. I can link that. I think I got it from Amazon, so I can also link that below. And I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Now, do not be fooled. There is magic going on right now, some sorcery, where I cut out how many times I had to lay this tape down in order to make sure that these were very similar to the eye. So now that we have one, all we have to do is match the other one. Easy, right? You give it a try and let me know. Or if you have any tips and tricks, I am all ears for sure. Again, what you do want to make sure you're doing is once you do get it lined up properly, just take your fingers down across and make sure you're smoothing it down so your tape, you know, when you're first doing this, you're only laying your tape down really lightly, but you want to make sure that you're going back and smoothing it down so that it doesn't have air bubbles where paint can get into. So we start with taking the paint, and again, this time I start on the ends to make sure that I'm getting that section first, and I'm taking a smaller foam dabber and just repeating the process. I'm taking our Waverly chalk paint and I am pouncing out any extra paint and going across our stripe. We'll repeat that for the other side, and then of course I'm going to go in and I'm going to take my blow dryer and blow dry that really quick. Super quick when you're rewatching this video, of course. And once it's dry and I've got 2 coats, I'm going to peel up our paint. This is like magic. I can't wait to see, and I'm thankful I didn't have a lot of bleeds, because of course sometimes that does happen. It didn't happen in this case. I did get a little extra paint that we have to go in and clean up, beginning with the little piece right here on the bottom right hand side. All I did was take a wet wipe, and sometimes this works, and I took a wet wipe and I rubbed it off and it came off. I didn't have to touch up the paint there, but what I did do was just take my brush back into our plaster and just kind of trimmed it up a little bit. Now this is where your personal preference comes in. This could be florals, this could be a cute little bunny, but what I found was this cute little piggy, and I thought he was going to be perfect for my kitchen. What I did was I printed this image from the Graphics Fairy onto tissue paper so I could have my own decoupage paper, and what I'm doing now is cutting it away from the copy paper. Talk about a rabbit hole project. You will go down the rabbit hole printing everything on tissue paper when you realize you can do your own decoupage paper. What I'm doing now wasn't really necessary because my graphic is not that detailed, but I just traced around it with water and then I can rip it away. I could have easily have just cut this out with scissors and done the same thing and had a cleaner image, to be honest. Now that I have my piggy all cut out, I'm going to take some DIY liquid patina, or you could use the Mod Podge. It doesn't matter what you use as far as the transfer medium. I just used this because I wanted to try it out. I'm going to put a thin layer and put my little piggy's head down and just kind of rub it out a little bit, and then lift up the other side, put another thin layer down, and then put the other side of the piggy down. The important part here is to make sure that whatever transfer or decoupage you're using, paper you're using, you go around the entire edge of the piece that you're using and make sure you can get glue or whatever transfer medium underneath of it so that you get that put down well. Then I'm going to go in with my brayer and I'm just gently moving all of the bubbles out if there are any. After that, I go around all of the edges of the entire bottom of the tray to basically seal it so that I don't have to put a wax on it. I'm just using a very thin coat, and honestly, this liquid patina, once it's dry, is a little shiny, so if you prefer the matte look, you might want to go for the matte Mod Podge instead. Whatever works for you. And here's our finished projects. I hope you've enjoyed me sharing my inspiration with you. Some super easy projects, some maybe not so easy. I love to hear your feedback. Give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing. Just thanks again. Thanks for the patience while I took some time away and mourned the loss of my grandma. Thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to get back into it, and I'll see you guys soon.